You know what occurred to me?
No.
You're just a kid. You don't have the faintest idea what you're talking about.
Why, thank you.
After more than 25 years since its release, there's something particularly painful about listening to Sean's iconic speech to Will in Good Will Hunting. The setup is still the same. After a not-so-successful first encounter, the wary psychologist and the troubled young man come together again in a park where the latter's veneer of superior intelligence is effectively disarmed through a simple speech about the importance of actual lived experience.
Michelangelo. I know a lot about him. I bet you can't tell me what it smells like in the Sistine Chapel.
The words are undeniably timeless, relating to anyone, anywhere who is, in some way or another, existing in survival mode, alive but not living, holding themselves back.
And you would know about sleeping sitting up in a hospital room for 2 months, holding her hand, because the doctors could see in your eyes that the terms visiting hours don't apply to you.
But the thing that makes this monologue hit so differently today, and the reason I keep returning to it, is that it feels like we've only moved further away from this kind of meaningful living. Now, I don't want to make light of the specifics of Will's situation, his poverty, his trauma, but I also can't help but watch him going to work with his best buddy, hanging out at bars, going to ball games, goofing around. You know, watching him exist in that broader time and place just before the internet would change everything, and feel an even deeper poignancy in what Sean is talking about. Like so many others that grew up with the internet, and that are growing up now in an almost completely digital age, I spent much of my youth, probably too much, in front of a screen. Not necessarily alone, but still isolated, having everything within reach, yet still experiencing it all indirectly. A life lived vicariously through intermediaries. Not all of this was bad, of course, but it's a balancing act. And it took me many years to realize just how much the balance was off, and that no matter how informative or constructive the vicariously experienced life can be, it can never fully replace the directly experienced one. It's been about 15 years since I first saw Good Will Hunting. Now, I do know what it smells like in the Sistine Chapel. I've seen many beautiful places, transformative places. Most of them weren't even that far away. I also know now what it's like to sit in a hospital room holding the hand of your loved one, which is a story for another day. The point is, Sean's words definitely opened my eyes to the real meaning of experience, of the nature of wisdom and knowledge, and, in many ways, of the essence of life itself. And perhaps above all, he underscored how easily we can miss out on all of this, how easily we can fool ourselves, that we have seen it all, that we know it all. We can spend a lifetime living in that pretense, never truly knowing the world, never truly knowing ourselves.
Unless you want to talk about you, who you are, then I'm fascinated.
For that's ultimately the real reason to care about all this, right? It's not about collecting random bits of experiential trivia about places and things that you can't read about online or in books. It's about deepening your own inner being. It's about forming your character, getting to know yourself. It's about becoming a person.
Tror du inte jag förstår? Den hopplösa drömmen om att vara. Inte verka utan vara. I varje ögonblick medveten, vaksam. Och samtidigt avgrunden mellan vad du är inför andra och vad du är inför dig själv. Svindelkänslan och den ständiga hungern att äntligen få bli avslöjad. Att få bli genomskådad, reducerad. Att få till och med utplånad.
Decades earlier, Ingmar Bergman's persona already presented a beautiful articulation of what is here referred to as the hopeless dream of being. The entire movie feels like an unsettling fever dream, at once alienating and intimate, drawing you in only to strip you down and leave you dismantled. But as much as the cinematic techniques that achieved this experience, you know, the unconventional camera movements, the deliberate blocking of the characters, the sound design, the editing, etc., have been applauded and deconstructed over the years, I feel the words themselves, the language that is used here, has gone somewhat underappreciated as a vital ingredient in the greater whole.
Vår tros och vår tvivels oerhörda rop mot mörkret och tystnaden är ett av de ohyggligaste bevisen för vår övergivenhet och vår skrämda outtalade vetskap.
It leads into the broader question here. Why do movie monologues even matter so much to me in the first place? Why dedicate an entire video to them? After all, cinema is a visual medium, right? As opposed to literature or a stage play, monologues should matter the least here. It's like director Denis Villeneuve recently said, I don't remember movies because of a good line. I remember movies because of a strong image. Pure image and sound. That is the power of cinema. It's a statement that recalls similar sentiments from other great filmmakers, like the Hungarian master Béla Tarr, for example, who doesn't believe movies are about stories at all. It's mostly picture, sound, a lot of emotions. The stories are just covering something. And you know, I agree. There is a unique potential to cinema in capturing the human experience beyond what we can express in words. But while it is true that this experience is one of image, sound, and emotion, it's also one of language, and more specifically, of the performing of language. For when it comes to all the monologues that deeply affected me, that I have come to carry around in my head like mantras to be repeated over and over again, it's not just the words themselves that made an impact, it's also the context in which they were spoken, and the performer which they were spoken by.
They're not real. You get that, right? None of it is real.
It's been 3 years since the movie Pig came out, but I still often think about that restaurant scene in which Nicolas Cage's character just pierces right through this other guy. A chef who looks like he's achieved great success, but who in reality is just living a lie, trying to conform to some image of who he thinks he should be, without truly being anyone.
Every day you'll wake up and there'll be less of you. You live your life for them and they don't even see you. You don't even see yourself.
Again, the words spoken are undeniably timeless and beautifully capture a story that, at its heart, is about passion and attention, and about how easily we can lose sight of what's important by mistaking empty calories for nourishment, subsequently finding ourselves hungry in a world of plenty. But there's just something about the way Nicolas Cage delivers them, both direct and unrelenting, yet also strangely heartfelt and empathetic, that gives them that extra layer of gravitas. Like, he's not trying to get a win, he isn't looking to shame this guy, he genuinely wants to make him see, make us see, what he is saying.
We don't get a lot of things to really care about.
Sometimes truth is best conveyed by presenting it straightforwardly and unavoidably, leaving the audience no space to ignore or misinterpret it. This can be somewhat confrontational, like when trying to point out how that shell you're hiding in, that pretense that you think you can safely live in, isn't just tragic and detrimental to your sense of self. It is also futile, bound to break apart.
Man kan stänga in sig och skärma av. Behöver man ju inte spela några roller, visa några ansikten eller göra några falska gester. Tror man. Men så är det verkligheten jävlas. Ditt gömställe är inte tillräckligt tätt. Överallt sipprar det in livsyttringar. Du tvingas att reagera.
But the direct truth can also serve to add pathos and emphasis, to help you understand the importance of certain experiences. Like a young romance that has come to an end and is about to determine someone's relation to love for the rest of their lives.
Right now you may not want to feel anything. Maybe you never wanted to feel anything. But feel something you obviously did.
This conversation between a father and his son comes from the ending to Call Me By Your Name, the story about a young man named Elio who just experienced his first love. Set in 1980s Italy, the whole movie has this beautiful dreamlike atmosphere that just transports you into what almost feels like a different realm. Which is perhaps why it is all the more important that at the end of it, when the summer is over and the reality of heartbreak sets in, there is this grounded moment with his father who, as the camera pulls in and the background noise is drawn out, calmly and thoughtfully reframes his son's pain and vulnerability not as a defect to be fixed, but as a profound quality to be cherished.
Right now, there's sorrow, pain. Don't kill it. And with it, the joy you felt.
Oh, I loved you.
Terrence Malick's To the Wonder is a strange movie, one in which the story, insofar as we can even speak of a traditional narrative here, is almost entirely performed through imagery, body language, and scattered thoughts.
Estás dentro de mí. Y no tengo ninguna experiencia de ti.
It's a movie that feels out of time, completely unbound from convention, which is probably why it is still such a polarizing work. People seem to either find something unique within it, something they connect to deeply, or they find nothing and bounce back on its complete absence of the cinematically familiar. Me, I'm somewhere in the middle. It's not my favorite Terrence Malick movie, but it has still left a lasting impression on me nonetheless, which, somewhat ironically given the movie's many, many beautiful shots, is mainly because of one of its monologues.
We wish to live inside the safety of the laws. We fear to choose. Jesus insists on choice.
Unlike in Good Will Hunting, Pig, or Call Me By Your Name, Malick doesn't put his grand speech center stage. Instead, it just kind of fades in, with the words floating somewhere in the periphery of the wider soundscape, until eventually being drawn out completely by seemingly irrelevant noise.
In the earth, with him, we can do nothing.
This is intentional, however, for it reflects the larger thematic struggle that the movie is about, mainly the disconnection experienced by Ben Affleck's character Neil, about him not being in touch with that which matters most, with that which gives him meaning and purpose. As John Baskin wrote in his review, never has Malick created a figure so mute, so obscurely weighed down as Neil, in conspicuous contrast to the never-ending movement of the female characters who orbit him. His most characteristic action is to stand and stare, as if watching the film of his own life. Now, I was going to immediately circle back to the monologue in question here, but it was at this point in the script that a weird realization dawned on me. This is Terrence Malick's Fight Club. Okay, not exactly of course, but bear with me for a minute. There is a particular kind of modern commentary in Fight Club, which the movie boasts through a variety of monologues that you surely remember.
Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate so we can buy shit we don't need.
For a slightly more updated version, you might also remember Elliot's ranting in Mr. Robot.
I'm not saying anything new. We all know why we do this, not because Hunger Games books makes us happy, but because we want to be sedated. Because it's painful not to pretend. Because we're cowards.
Both speak to a kind of temporal displacement that many people, especially men, seem to experience in today's society.
We're the middle children of history, man. No purpose or place. We have no great war, no great depression. Our great war is a spiritual war. Our great depression is our lives.
They certainly hit on some truth. After all, if the words didn't resonate, they wouldn't have been remembered. But as much as I can connect with their general commentaries, aside from briefly making me feel cooler and edgier, these monologues have never been truly transformative for me. They didn't end up giving me a meaningful path forward. Like they offered a diagnosis, but no real antidote. Because no, Tyler Durden's anarchistic cult of space monkeys pretending to have achieved some form of enlightenment and liberty is, by the movie's own account, not the answer either. And this is where To the Wonder did make a difference. Or at least, gave me a different, more eloquent perspective that turned out to be far more constructive in actually achieving some kind of growth. Malick too shows us the disordering effects of modernity, and the way it's obscuring our natural connection to the earth and to true sources of meaning and purpose. In fact, it's a recurring theme throughout his filmography.
The world's gone to the dogs. People are greedy. Keep getting worse.
In his works, this fundamental conflict is framed as one between the way of the world, materialistic, selfish, dominating, and the way of grace, of love, compassion, and meaningful engagement. Neil, who works for an oil company, is no ambiguous product of the former, of the modern world. Lost in a haze of failing relationships and affairs, he stumbles through life aimlessly, chasing some vague desire that never truly materializes, and that he therefore is never truly able to fulfill. Going back to Baskin's review, Neil has never known what he wants, only that he wants. And as such, as the review continues, he conveys the mystery and the inexhaustibility of the Western male's longing, divested of particularity and even of conscious motive. Truly Weber's specialists without spirit, sensationalists without heart. Though this might read as a condemnation, there is also a hope here in the acknowledgement that there is a genuine longing, a genuine capacity for Neil, and for all men, to be moved by love, beauty, and meaning. It's just in conflict with the ways of the world, and with the fantasies of social status and grandeur it offers in particular to men, as the Tree of Life also makes more explicit.
I wanted to be loved because I was great. A big man. I'm nothing.
And it's on this note that Neil's priest, a secondary character in the movie, at one point gives a lecture that might as well have been aimed directly at Neil, and that he could have learned from, if only he was listening. We wish to live inside the safety of the laws, the priest says, referring here not so much to actual laws, but rather to the broader notion of conventions, comforts, and other artificial obstructions, false promises, and temporary sedatives getting in the way of true meaning. We fear to choose. Jesus insists on choice. The one thing he condemns utterly is avoiding the choice.
To choose is to commit yourself, and to commit yourself is to run the risk of failure, the risk of sin, the risk of betrayal.
He goes on to explain that Jesus can deal with all of this, that forgiveness is never denied, and that if you make a mistake you can repent. But, and this is the part that has always stuck with me, the part that is almost erased by background noise and must be paid active attention to if you want to even properly hear it. But the man who hesitates, he says, who does nothing, who buries his talent in the earth, with him he can do nothing. Now, I don't consider myself a religious person, but I do find the language and symbols of religion useful as a metaphor. And so even though it might demand a bit of translating for an atheist or agnostic person, I think there's great value to be found here. Because for starters, to invoke scripture, or any ancient text or philosophy, is to implicitly remind yourself that whatever particular struggle you are going through is, at its heart, a timeless one that is rooted in deeper, more fundamental issues that aren't solely predicated on the current state of society. In fact, another way to arrive at this conclusion is to simply go back in cinematic history, which by now has been around long enough to prove that many of the what we see as specifically contemporary problems have actually been around for much longer. The famous monologue at the end of Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator, for example, which was released well over 80 years ago in 1940, may as well have been written yesterday.
Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little.
To be fair, the temporal distance from which these words are now spoken to us do allow for a more pessimistic interpretation, namely that this simply means that society still is bad, maybe fundamentally bad. But to me, and this is where we get to the second reason why the words of the priest resonate so strongly with me, and the most important thing that separates Malick's commentary from that of a Fight Club or a Mr. Robot, is that the universality of this struggle signifies that the real achievement of purpose and meaning is not so much determined by the state of the world around us, as much as it is determined by our own willingness to take true responsibility for our place in it. In other words, it's not just a question of life advice or personal happiness. It's not just about what we want to do. It's also about what we have to do, about what is demanded of us. And as such, the words transform into a question of morality.
What God desires is here and here. And what you decide to do every day, you will be a good man. Or not.
The director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven is not just one of my favorite historical epics. I also believe it's a genuine masterpiece when it comes to exploring moral philosophy. Balian, the protagonist, is a character in search of goodness and virtue. What man is a man who does not make the world better? He has engraved in his workshop. He finds guidance in the principles of knighthood, a code of honor that, in its own right, is already worth remembering.
Be without fear in the face of your enemies. Be brave and upright that God may love thee.
Speak the truth, always, even if it leads to your death. Safeguard the helpless and do no wrong.
And yet, when I think of Kingdom of Heaven, it's another monologue that my attention is drawn towards. One that adds a vital context to why principles like the ones proposed by the knighthood are so important.
Remember that howsoever you are plagued, or by whom, your soul is in your keeping alone.
In this conversation with King Baldwin, the king prepares Balian for the social-political game he is about to enter into, which is pretty much the same game that we all have to take part in, by reminding him of the more important, the more existential conflict that lies hidden beneath the surface. The conflict that arises because, no matter what our place in life is, each human being possesses a fundamental inner freedom that cannot be compromised unless we let it, and that therefore imbues us with an innate demand for personal responsibility.
Even though those who presume to play you be kings or men of power, when you stand before God, you cannot say, "But I was told by others to do thus," or that virtue was not convenient at the time. This will not suffice.
What he explains here are basically the principle-based ethics from philosopher Immanuel Kant, which, to put it simply, propose that what is morally right is not determined by the outcome of an action, but rather by the intention that preceded it, by the principle that was being adhered to. There's obviously a lot more to it than this, but for the purposes of our discussion here, what matters is that it's a philosophy that strives for a pure conscience, one that doesn't allow us, as Balian is eventually confronted with, to do a little evil to achieve a greater good.
It is a kingdom of conscience, or nothing.
It's definitely one of the more extreme ethical philosophies, and also one that, despite having such a seemingly simple premise, is deceptively complicated when it comes to actually bringing it into practice, which might be the real reason why I've always been so fascinated by it. For to hold on to those principles that, on paper, would lead to a kingdom of conscience if everyone would follow them, doesn't always seem so consequential, or even righteous when placed in a real-world context where such moral simplicity is just never the case.
If God gives us free will, we're responsible for what we do, what we fail to do, aren't we?
Take A Hidden Life, for example, another Terrence Malick movie, which beautifully explores the rather rigid Kantian beliefs and their implications through the true story of Franz Jägerstätter, a man who refused to serve in Nazi Germany and who was prosecuted for it.
I want to save my life, but not through lies.
By being confronted with a choice between evil or death, A Hidden Life examines the at times impossible complications of trying to live by one's own conscience, and the real cost that doing so might have.
I find no one to turn to. Nothing enters my soul.
It shows how that which compromises our core beliefs, that which we can reasonably argue to be evil, might very well be that which is lawful. It might be what is commonly practiced, commonly believed, or even what is commonly valued in a country, a culture, a religion or ideology. And more than that, especially in our modern society, that which we see as evil, or at the very least, that which compromises the principles that we would otherwise want to uphold, is very likely that which we, in some way or another, are already partaking in, and that which feels increasingly difficult, if not downright impossible, to separate ourselves from, even if we were willing to make significant personal sacrifices. As such, it's hard not to surrender ourselves to a kind of fatalistic relativism. You know, the idea that nothing we do makes a meaningful difference, that any attempt of doing something would only end up making us a hypocrite anyways, and that it's therefore better to just ignore it all, to bury our talent in the earth, and to go back to distracting ourselves with the superfluous. Go back to putting up walls, chasing after material gain, false ideals, and empty philosophies. But at the same time, it's also precisely because of this prevailing sentiment, this ease with which we can fall back into inaction, unawareness, unbeing, that I find myself coming back to these movies, back to the words of all these monologues, and to the strength by which they are delivered, to shake myself out of apathy, to remind myself of what truly matters, what it is that I'm called upon to do, called upon to be, in personal relationships, in the causes I believe in my general faith and connection to the world and the people in it. And whatever form that takes, from more concrete action as an individual or as part of a greater collective movement in pursuit of systemic change, or a more abstract leap of faith, the dedication to a belief or an ideal. For me, it all begins with
we rip out so much of ourselves to be cured of things faster.
You have to start out with yourself.
That we go bankrupt by the age of 30.
Man, you're sitting on a winning lottery ticket.
And have less to offer each time we start with someone new.
You're too much of a pussy to cash it in.
More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness.
I dishonored it all and didn't notice the glory.
They don't even know you.
You shall love, whether you like it or not.
Because you haven't shown them.
You do what's in your heart, son, you'll be fine.
This video, of course, but barely scratches the surface when it comes to covering all the great monologues that have, and that still are, shaping our worldview. Monologues that stir our emotions, and that we come to carry around with us wherever we go. On this note, there's a wonderful monologue in Frances Ha, written by Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach, which talks about the strange but beautiful experience of being in a relationship, but which really points to that general idea of each of us walking around with our own secret worlds of meaning and connection.
It's that thing when you're with someone and you love them and they know it and they love you and you know it.
For the rest of the monologue, I'd highly recommend you check out the full movie, which is now streaming on friend of the channel and sponsor of today's video, MUBI. MUBI is a curated cinema streaming exceptional movies from around the world. Here you will find a vast library of great movies from iconic directors to emerging auteurs, with each and every one of them being carefully hand-selected to provide you with the best that cinema has to offer. And if you go to mubi.com/likestoriesofold, you can try MUBI for free for 30 days. So be sure to claim your extended free trial to start your free month of great cinema today.